G'day folks, welcome. So I had a question come in, which is a very important question that everyone needs to understand, especially if you're at the beginning stages of practice. So it's basically, how do you manage time and energy is the first question, right? We have to look at the basic fundamental aspects of this. So you got to look at your diet, you got to look at your sleep patterns and what gives you energy, what takes away energy. Right? So these are all simple things that we need to pay attention to. So for example, for myself, when I first started practicing, what helped was a ketogenic diet. So I basically, as soon as I started feeling energy and I'm like, this is exactly what I was looking for a long time, I did everything I can in my power to make sure that I can increase sensitivity and I'm making progress, okay? So the way we do this is by stilling our mind. And if there's a lot of static, then your sensitivity will be decreased. So a ketogenic diet helps you to get into that equanimity state a lot easier. So I jumped on the carnivore diet for about a year, but you don't have to go that hardcore, just get into a ketosis based diet. That might help you. But you got to find out what diet works for you in terms of energy sensitivity. But for me, ketosis worked. And so that's one aspect. The other aspect was my sensitivity increased when I practiced in the morning, just before sunrise. So everything's waking up, so the life force, all the plants and animals are waking up. So there's an abundance of life force early in the morning, so I could feel more. And I would go to a place of power, such as the bay that's just down here for me, or forest or a park, whatever you have available, go there and practice, you'll feel more. The initial aspect of training is about building sensitivity. Right? Once you've accumulated enough sensitivity, you basically identify with the energy. You become the energy, right? Before it's about like, I can feel energy outside of myself, and then you want to become the energy. This is when you're able to apply your will through the energy to the various outcomes that you want. Okay, once you get to this place, everything becomes very easy. Then it's all about integrating the practice into your life. Okay, so you're not distinguishing like this is my practice time and this is my life, because that'll be a very slow progress. Okay, you have to figure out a way on how you're going to integrate this into your everyday life. So it becomes a way of life, right? So if you're working, say for example, if you're an engineer, you got to see, okay, what are the different aspects that I can bring the practice and overlay that onto my work to become a better engineer, for example. Right? You want the whole process is to make you better at everything that you do, make life better. Everything is refined through this process because now your consciousness is merged with energy, right? And then you're able to apply your will through the energy to the outcome that you want. This is where we want to get to. Once you get to this place, it's all a matter of refinement. Okay, and you got your serious practice, which you might put 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever time capabilities that you have. This is where you're going up levels. But throughout the day, you're basically keeping mindful of energy, that you are energy, and everything that you're doing is through those principles. Okay? Once you get to that point, it just becomes fun, right? It's no longer practice as such, where I'm sitting down or I'm standing qigong or whatever it may be. I'm living life according to the principles, and life becomes very easy. Everything becomes refined, right? So we need to look at a few different other aspects on how to increase our sensitivity and increase the progression of our outcome. So you got to look at things that take away energy. Obviously, a poor diet, bad sleep patterns, and any sort of habits that are taking away from your practice is going to be detrimental, which is kind of obvious. So you look at all the different habits that you have. So social media. Social media will rob energy off you, especially if you're watching stuff that's kind of irrelevant to your life and whatnot. So it's an addictive thing where you just keep scrolling, and then before you know it, an hour's gone. It's like, oh, holy crap, I just wasted an hour, right? So you got to look at all these things. So this is where the introspection happens, okay? Look at yourself, your habits, and what are your belief systems, what are your value systems, and all these sort of things, because they can either support your practice or they can take away from practice, okay? So if you fix these underlying issues, then it becomes easy. Right? You got to really do the introspection aspect and find out what is it that you believe, right? Your belief systems basically will dictate your outcomes. If you're doing the practice but you're believing something that's contradictory to the practice, then your progress is going to be very, very slow. Okay, so you need to go through the introspection aspect and transform your belief structures. It's best to have no belief, have an open view on, and you're providing evidence and accumulating faith, right? Your belief system is basically a hindrance towards reality, right? You'll come to a conclusion without experiencing it. So we have to experience it, and then that gives us evidence, and then we start to accumulate faith, right? That's the best way to go about this. And when we talk about faith, it's basically the self-fulfilling prophecy that you create in terms of the outcome that you want. And this is where once you become the energy, right, you have a self-fulfilling prophecy that I want the energy to do this, and that will happen. Okay, this is how you accumulate faith, right? And the faith is a big component of this. Okay, and this is where the scientific principle kind of contradicts a little bit. But if you look at it in a way, like everything that we do is faith-based, especially when there's evidence for it, right? Even the scientists themselves have faith in a certain theory that they have, but they still remain as a theory, but they have faith that this is probably true. That's the approach that we need to take on this, right? Every time you provide yourself evidence, you're accumulating faith. So make sure you get that aspect right, okay? So you're not blindly believing anything, just providing constant evidence throughout the day through your work, through what you're eating, the social interactions that you're having, all of these things, it's practice, okay? And you're providing incremental evidence everywhere in every interactions that you're having, and that's accumulating faith. And that's what gives you the J curve where you have massive quantum leaps in your practice, okay? So be mindful of that. So in terms of managing time and energy into this, obviously the physical aspect, take care of your diet, take care of your sleep patterns, and astrally, what are your belief structures, like identify them, and what are you paying attention to, meaning social media and social interactions. Some social interactions will give you energy, some social interactions will take away energy. So be careful of who you interact with. Some people, they may be conducive to your practice, where they support what you're trying to do, or they may not be. So you got to look at all these things because they can affect your practice. And mentally, how much static do you have in your mind? If you have too much clutter in your mind, it'll be hard to concentrate, right? And concentration is a very fundamental aspect to developing this whole skill sets, right? So you look at all these things. When you clearly identify this big picture, you put it on a big piece of whiteboard or paper, and you're able to see it, it's outside of your head, then you'll know exactly what you need to fix, right? Exactly where you're getting progression, where you're getting stifled, right? So look at all these things. You want to bring the logical and intellectual part into this as much as possible as well. It's not all intuitive. Yes, the intuitive part is very important, but it's a balance of the intellect and the intuitive which creates fast progression and growth rate, okay? So the other aspect, the other question that came through was extended practice versus short practices throughout the day, okay? And again, it's the same answer. You want to become the energy. If you identify yourself as the energy, your practice is a way of life, okay? But in saying that, when you're doing the serious practice on where you're accumulating stillness, accumulating and cultivating different frequencies, there's benefits for both, okay? So the way I do it, the short intensive practice that I do is more for power-based. The long duration practice is basically for cultivating stillness and emptiness and merging with the frequencies that I'm working with, right? So that's how I use it. So for power, I use the short intensive weight training or martial training and integrate all the internal principles based on those trainings, okay? That's the easiest way and how I enjoy doing short intensive practice. And the long extended practice is for accumulating stillness essentially in the different frequencies. Because when you accumulate stillness, you're identified with it. The three bodies merge. There's a mind, chi, physical fusion, and you are the energy, right? That's the objective of any meditation that we're doing. We want to become the meditation object, okay? So there's benefits in both, but you got to figure out what works for you depending on your time restraints and all these sort of things. But the main thing is, again, integrate it into your way of life. If it's work, you overlay all these principles onto work. right? So the work becomes practice. If it's relationship, overlay these principles onto that. So for example, say if you have a partner, what can you do to make that interaction that you have every night or every morning or whatever it may be better, right? You use the energy to fill the space of happiness, joy, whatever it may be. And every time you interact with them, making sure that you're making them feel good, right? So if it's early in the morning, you're having breakfast together or whatever it may be, you send energy to them so they have an amazing day. Okay, simple ways to practice. Okay, this is how you integrate it into your everyday life. So the other aspect that came through the question was, how do you manage plateaus? Okay, plateaus essentially happen for a few reasons, but two main reasons is, one is you're stuck in a loop. You're stuck in a routine where you're practicing for the sake of practicing. Okay, you're not clearly defining what are your outcomes, and if you're not identifying what your outcomes are, or defining it, you're not going towards it, okay? You're just acting without purpose, okay? We want to make sure that we don't do that. Every time you practice, you sit down to do a practice or standing or whatever it may be, before you practice, you write down, what is it that I want out of this practice? And you write down the process on what I'm going to do. And then you practice, and then you write down what were the outcomes. If you manage that, then you won't have plateaus. But another reason why you can get plateaus is basically you're building immunity. So when you build immunity, it's like, for example, if you've ever done a cold plunge, you jump into the cold, icy water, and there's a massive shock, and it's like, whoa, everything's like burning, and it goes right down into your bones. There's a contrast, right? So you're feeling the cold, but you stay there for a few minutes, and then you start to build immunity to the cold, and it's not affecting you as much. It's the same sort of thing that we have when we do, especially extended practice. You're building immunity to the energy that you're working with, meaning that you're sensing less because you're becoming more of it. This is a good thing, but we want to make sure that you got to be sensitive to that. It is that, and not that you're stuck in a loop, right? So the way we measure this is outcomes. Okay, if your skill is developing, then you're on the right track. So those plateaus, so they're not really plateaus. It's just you're becoming immune to what you're feeling. So you're not feeling as much because you are it. Okay, so this is where we can use the law of contrast or polarity to help us get out of that. Okay, so if that's the case, stop practicing for a day. Switch off, okay, rest, just do whatever you need to do, and then come back to it, and then you'll know that it wasn't a plateau, right? You'll shift your sensitivity to a new level, okay? So sometimes people think it's a plateau, but it's not, okay? Especially if you're true to your practice and you have faith in what you're doing, and you're going through the process properly, you're building immunity to all of these things. And the way you measure that it's not a plateau is your skills are developing, okay? If your skills are not developing, that means you're plateauing, right? So make sure you're on the right track when it comes to that, okay? But overall, what I would say is you have to integrate it into everyday aspects of life and make it a way of life. That's where progression really happens. And it's not about sacrificing anything. You're refining every aspect of your life to the way you want it. That's essentially what this is about. Where your consciousness merges with the energy, then your will goes through the energy. It's not from me to the energy, you are the energy, right? That's the objective what we're trying to get, okay? So look at all the different things. So like physically, sleep, food, all that kind of stuff. Astrally, belief structures, what am I paying attention to, media, social interactions, all those sort of things. Mentally, how much static do I have in my mind, okay? If you address all those things, you can manage all these different aspects of life, okay? I'll see you next video.